Hello and a very good morning to everyone. Welcome to the daily newspaper analysis of the Shankar IAS Academy, and today's date is 8/8/2024. Displayed here are the list of important articles that we would be discussing for today from various newspapers, along with the prelims and mains practice questioning at the end. So without any much further delay, let's get into the articles discussion. Let us see the first news for today, which is the Bimstec. Let us see why it is in the news. India urges Bimstec members to fast-track preferential trade. First, let us see the basics of Bimstec. The Bimstec, abbreviated as Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, is a regional organization comprising 7 member states such as the Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Myanmar, Nepal, Sri Lanka and Thailand. It was established on June 6, 1997 through the Bangkok Declaration. First, initially it was known as Bimstec, which includes Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka and Thailand Economic Cooperation. But later it was renamed to Bimstec after the inclusion of Myanmar, and later Bimstec after Nepal and Bhutan joined. The only difference in the abbreviation is the addition of each member countries. Now moving on to the objectives of this organization. First, to accelerate economic growth and social progress in the region, which is the South Asia and Southeast Asia. Next, to promote collaboration and mutual assistance in economic, technical and scientific fields. Later, to provide mutual assistance for regional and sub-regional development. And finally, to enhance cooperation in various sectors including trade, investment, technology, energy, tourism and especially fisheries. Now let us see the institutional framework or the institutional mechanism of the Bimstec organization. First, it includes a Bimstec summit, which is the highest policy making body. Here, for example, the Bimstec free trade agreement was planned to be implemented. Next is the ministerial meetings which will be conducted in their frameworks, where sector-specific ministers meet periodically to discuss and advance cooperation. And finally, the framework comprises of Bimstec Secretariat, which is located in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and it coordinates and monitors the implementation of Bimstec activities. Now let us see few recent developments done by the Bimstec organization. First is the 4th Bimstec Summit, which happened in the Kathmandu in 2018. It emphasized the importance of connectivity, poverty alleviation and combating terrorism. Also, it adopted the Bimstec Connectivity Master Plan project. Next initiative is the 5th Bimstec Summit, which happened in Colombo in 2022. Focus on post-COVID recovery, it tried to enhance connectivity and digital transformation. And also signing of various agreements were done to bolster cooperation in security, energy and trade sectors. Now moving on to the challenges faced by the Bimstec organizations. First, the main is disputes between member states such as India-Myanmar and India-Bangladesh border issues affect cooperation, leading to geopolitical tensions. Next is the varied economic development levels among member states create challenges in uniform policy implementation, which leading to economic disparities. Next is the limited institutional capacity and lack of adequate resources for effective functioning because of the institutional weaknesses. And finally, persisting non-tariff barriers hinder trade and economic integration. Now let us see the India's role when it comes to Bimstec organization. India views Bimstec as a key platform for its neighborhood first and Act East policies. The next role is how, as China expands its Belt and Road Initiative BRI program across South and Southeast Asia, India views this growing presence as a challenge to its regional dominance. Thus, for India, this organization is seen as a counter to China's dominance. Next is to counter this, India is taking a leading role in Bimstec, promoting it as an alternative platform for regional cooperation. And finally, leading initiatives to enhance connectivity through infrastructure projects like the Kalandan Multimodal Transit Transport Project and the India-Myanmar Thailand Trilateral Highway. Now finally, let us see the significance of Bimstec. First, It enhances regional trade, investment, and economic integration, leading ultimately to the economic growth of the countries in that region. Next is to improve transport and communication infrastructure where there is great regional connectivity. Next, it strengthens cooperation in combating terrorism, transnational crimes, and disaster management. And there is security being implemented. Since this organization comprises of countries which are coastal in nature, it has to promote sustainable practices in agriculture, fisheries, and environmental conservation, leading to sustainable development. And finally, it enhances cultural exchanges and tourism, strengthening social and cultural bond where there is people to people ties. Thus, Bimstec holds significant potential for regional cooperation and development. By addressing the challenges and leveraging opportunities, member states can enhance economic growth, security, and social cultural ties in the region. For India, active engagement in Bimstec is crucial for advancing its strategic interest and fostering regional stabilities. Moving on to the MCQ for this topic, the first question is, which declaration marked the establishment of Bimstec? The Dhaka Declaration, Colombo Declaration, Kathmandu Declaration, and Bangkok Declaration. The answer is Bangkok Declaration. This does seems to be a very simple question, but UPSC tends to trap a lot of questions in such a way because a lot of countries are being mentioned in the organization, so there is a chance to give such easy trap questions. Moving on to the second news, the Lok Sabha passes the finance bill amending the provisions for the LTCG tax, which is the long-term capital gain tax. This news is very important as this has the most basic topic of polity, which is the finance bill. So first let us see what the news is about and let's move on to see what the finance bill is. Under the old tax method, long-term capital gains on real estate were taxed at 20% with the benefit of indexation, which adjusted the purchase price for inflation. A proposal to remove indexation benefit in calculation of long-term capital gains on sale of immovable properties in the budget 2024-25 was given. It introduces a lower LTCG tax rate of 12.5% without indexation benefits. Now, with severe backlash to the proposal done in the budget, a recent amendment in the Finance Bill 2024 was passed by the Lok Sabha. It says that the taxpayers who bought property before July 23, 2024 can now choose between paying the new 12.5% rate or sticking with the old method of 20% with indexation. This changes addresses prior criticism and provides more flexibility in tax planning. Now, the Finance Bill 2024 also includes an increase in the tax exemption limit on long-term capital gains from listed equities and bonds. The limit has been raised from 1 lakh to 1.25 lakh. This change is expected to benefit investors in the stock market by allowing them to exempt a higher amount of their gains from taxation. Now let us see what a financial bill is. A financial bill deals with fiscal matters, which is the revenue or expenditure. Financial bills are of three types. First, a money bill, which is Article 110. Next is the Financial Bill 1 under Article 117, Clause 1, and Financial Bill 2 under Article 117, Clause 3. First, let us see what a money bill is. It can be only introduced in Lok Sabha and not in Rajya Sabha. It can only be introduced by a minister. It can be introduced only on recommendation of President. It cannot be amended or rejected by Rajya Sabha. The Rajya Sabha should return the bill with or without the recommendations, which may or may not be accepted or rejected by Lok Sabha. It can be detained by Rajya Sabha for maximum period of 14 days. It requires certification of Speaker when transmitted to Rajya Sabha. It is sent for the President's assent even if it is approved by only Lok Sabha. There is also no chance of any disagreement between the two houses and hence there is no provision for joint sitting. The defeat of money bill leads to resignation of the government. Conditions for a money bill. The bill is considered a money bill if it contains only provisions dealing with all or any of the following matters, which is the taxes, and it should be imposing, changing or cancelling taxes. Next is the government borrowing, where regulating government loans and guarantees are there. Next is the government funds, where managing the consolidated fund and contingency fund of India, including deposits and withdrawals are there. Then is the spending, where allocating money for the consolidated fund of India is there. Next is the expenditures, which is declaring or increasing expenses charged on the consolidated fund of India. And finally, receipts and audits, where handling money received by the consolidated fund or the public account of India, including their custody, issuance and auditing. Some categories of money bill are finance bill, Article 110. It is introduced in the Lok Sabha every year immediately after the presentation of budget to give effect to the finance proposal of Government of India for the following financial year. The finance bills are treated as the money bills as they deal with amendments to various tax laws. Finance bill has to be passed within 75 days of its introduction. And next is the appropriation bill. It is also introduced in the Lok Sabha immediately after the adoption of relevant demand of grants. The appropriation bills are considered as money bills as they seek to authorize appropriation from the Consolidated Fund of India. Next is the Financial Bill 1, Article 117, Clause 1. These bills can be introduced only in Lok Sabha and only on recommendation of the President, like in the case of money bill. It can be introduced by any member. In all other aspects, they are governed by the same legislative processes applicable to the ordinary bill. Note that recommendation of the President is not required from moving an amendment making provisions for the reduction or abolition of tax. And finally, the Financial Bill 2 under Article 117, Clause 3. It has the provisions involving expenditure from the Consolidated Fund of India but does not include any matters mentioned in the money bill. In all other aspects, it is treated like a money bill. Recommendation by President for consideration is there, as the only special feature is that it cannot be passed by either house of the Parliament unless the President has recommended to the House the consideration of the bill. The recommendation of President is not required for introduction, but it is required for the consideration. Thus, this compromises what a financial bill is. I request everyone to revisit this video and try to listen to this audio all again so that you can have the understanding of the financial bill in its basic structure. Now let us move on to the MCQ related to this topic. Consider the following statements regarding financial bill in India. A financial bill category 1 can only be introduced in the Lok Sabha and requires the President's recommendation for introduction. The Rajya Sabha has the power to amend a money bill but cannot reject it. The finance bill is introduced every year along with the union budget to give effect to the government's financial proposals. Which of these statements given above are correct? 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3. The answer is 1 and 3 only. Let us see the explanation. Statement 1 is correct. A financial bill category 1 can only be introduced in the Lok Sabha and requires the President's recommendation for introduction. Statement 2 is incorrect. The Rajya Sabha cannot amend a money bill. It can only make recommendations and the Lok Sabha can either accept or reject these recommendations. And finally, the statement 3 is also correct. The finance bill is introduced every year along with the union budget to give effect to the government's financial proposals. Moving on to the third article. This is an interesting article about Delhi. First, let us see the mains question according to this article. Analyze the constitutional provisions and recent judicial rulings regarding the powers of the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi. How do these provisions and rulings affect the federal structure of India and the governance of Delhi? First, to address this question, we have to give what a Lieutenant Governor of Delhi is, that is their role, their importance and constitutional backing when it comes to the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi. And talking about the recent judicial rulings, it should back up the constitutional provisions, and the later part, that is the provisions and rulings, how it affects the federal structure of India and governance of Delhi, is nothing but the challenges need to be addressed with the examples in respect to the constitutional provisions have to be given. So to have a look at this mains question, let us see what the article is all about, and we can get an answer from the mains perspective. The context of the news is that the Supreme Court's ruling affirms that the Lieutenant Governor LG of Delhi has independent authority to appoint aldermen without the Delhi's government's advice. First, let us see who is an alderman. Alderman is a member of the municipal council or local government board, often elected or appointed, who represents a specific district or ward within a city. Aldermen typically have responsibilities that include making decisions on local policies, budgets, and ordinances, and addressing the concerns of their constituents. Let us see the constitutional and legal provisions for Delhi. The first schedule of the Constitution of India grants Delhi the status of Union Territory. It is administered by the President, acting to such extent as he thinks fit through an administrator to be appointed by him under Article 239. The 69th Constitutional Amendment Act 1991 added Article 239AA to the Constitution. The Union Territory of Delhi is called the National Capital Territory of Delhi, meaning it was providing with a legislative assembly and a council of ministers headed by a chief minister. However, the lieutenant governor can also refer any matter where there is a difference of opinion with the council of ministers to the president. This is as per Article 339AA. Thus, this dual control between lieutenant governor and the elected government leads to a power tussle. Now let us see the differences from other union territories. Delhi versus other union territories. The union territories in India are generally administered by the president through an appointed administrator. However, Delhi and Puducherry have special provisions. When it comes to Delhi and Puducherry, these UTs have a legislative assembly and a council of ministers headed by a chief minister. In Delhi, they can legislate on matters in the state list and the concurrent list, except for public order, police and land in Delhi. When it comes to other UTs, in the UTs like Lakshadweep and Dadra and Nagar Haveli, the administrator has limited powers, primarily advisory to the elected government. The judiciary in the UTs is governed by the constitution and parliamentary laws, with some variations in judicial powers across different UTs. Now let us see the powers of the Lieutenant Governor in Delhi. The Section 41 of the GNCT, that is Government of National Capital Territory of Delhi Act 1991, states that the LG shall act in this discretion during a matter that falls outside the range of the powers conferred on the Legislative Assembly. When it comes to administrative support, the LG works with the Delhi Police Commissioner and the Vice Chairperson of the Delhi Development Authority, that is DDA, to exercise his authority. In respect of matters related to police, public order and land, Lieutenant Governor exercises their authority to the extent delegated to him by the President. This is as per Delhi Police Act 1978, Delhi Development Act 1957 DDA under Delhi Municipal Corporation Act 1957 and Environmental Protection Act, etc. Now looking at the discretionary powers of LG, if in the Legislative Assembly elections no single party seeks a majority, LG is sovereign to act on this own and ask the leaders of the single largest party or the chosen leader of two or more parties to form the government. Tend to note this power, it seems to be an important power of the LG. During President's rule, the LG becomes the main executive head, appoints advisors and controls duration of President's rule. When it comes to statutory duty, currently the Supreme Court has ruled that the LG's power to appoint aldermen is a statutory duty not subject to the Council of Ministers' advice. Now let us see the challenges to Indian federal setup in reference to this shift of power. There is central overlordship. The LG of Delhi, appointed by the president, exercises significant powers independently of the elected Delhi government. This central control undermines the autonomy typically granted to the state governments, challenging the federal principle where states have a degree of self governance. Next, when it comes to discretionary powers, the LG authority to act independently on matters outside the legislative assembly jurisdiction or as mandated by law gives the center considerable influence over Delhi's administration. This contrasts with other states where the governor mostly acts on the advice of the State Council of Ministers, preserving the state's autonomy. The LG's final say in judicial or quasi judicial matters adds another layer of central oversight, bypassing the elected government's influence. When there is a conflict between the LG and the elected government, the LG can refer the issue to the president, whose decision is final. This process can sideline the elected government's decision, leading to central authorities' dominance over regional matters. Thus, there is resolution of differences. And finally, when it comes to the legislative powers, the lieutenant governor's ability to act independently in appointing officials like aldermen, as upheld by the Supreme Court, further illustrates the center government's overriding authority. Also, the Delhi government's legislative power can be overridden by parliament, unlike other states which have the exclusive legislative domains. Let us look at the court rulings. Key Supreme Court decisions were taken in respect to the Lieutenant Governor's role. In 2018 Constitution Bench ruling, the framework for governance was sought to clarify the role of LG and the Chief Minister, emphasizing the need for LG to act on aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. The exceptions are, it reiterated that the LG has special powers in matters of public order, police, and land. Next is the 2023 ruling on services. When it comes to administrative control, it ruled that the LG must follow the Delhi government's decision on service except for public order, police, and land. Rejection of unitary bias, such as disagreed with the center's argument of a strong unitary bias for UTs, emphasizing democracy and federalism as basic features of the constitution. Administrative officers must report to and follow the directions of the elected government, that is the Council of Ministers. LG must adhere to the decision of the elected government in administrative matters except where special powers are exercised, that is to uphold triple chain of accountability. Thus, in spite of these rulings, there is still an upper hand for the LG through this newly given order. Now, finally moving to the last article for today, let us see a mains question related to it. In reference to the issues in India's neighborhood, what are the measures that India can adopt to enhance its relationships with the neighboring countries? This is a very direct and a very easy question to address. First, we should know the issues in the India's neighborhood, such as its different countries, and measures in different fields such as economic, polity, defense, to know the challenges and how to adopt measures in those fields. So, in light of this question, let us see an article related to it. Let us see what is in the news. Sheikh Hasina's downfall in Bangladesh is due to widespread civil unrest, allegations of election rigging, and heavy-handed governance. Despite economic growth, dissatisfaction has grown, leading to violent protests and her eventual resignation and exile. Her story serves as a warning against attempts to dominate politics and suppress opposition. The end of Sheikh Hasina's rule has brought uncertainty and political instability. The opposition accuses the government of authoritarianism and election rigging. The reinstatement of the 30% quota for descendants of freedom fighters in government job led to violent protest, causing significant unrest and a government crackdown, including curfews and internet shutdown. This Bangladesh news has been exclusively spoken in our previous news analysis video, so kindly do have a check. Now, in light of this news piece, let us see the recent crisis in several democratic states in India's neighborhood. First is the Myanmar military coup and civil unrest. On February 1st, 2021, the military overthrew the democratically elected government, detaining leaders like Aung San Suu Kyi. There is civil unrest as massive protests erupted, leading to a brutal military crackdown, widespread violence, and significant loss of life. The political crisis had led to humanitarian disaster with thousands of people displaced. Second is the Sri Lankan economic crisis and political turmoil. Severe economic mismanagement led to a financial meltdown characterized by food and fuel shortages, skyrocketing inflation, and a foreign exchange crisis. Massive protest in 2022 to 23 forced President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to resign. The crisis highlighted deep-rooted corruption and political instability in Sri Lanka. The third is the Nepal frequent political changes and governance issue. Political instability. Nepal has seen frequent changes in government with no party able to secure a stable majority. This has led to short-lived coalitions and political uncertainty. Political infighting has hampered governance, leading to slow economic progress and inadequate response to social issues. Next is the Pakistan economic woes and political instability. Pakistan faces severe economic difficulties, including high inflation, mounting debt, and a balance of payment crisis. The political landscape is highly volatile, with former Prime Minister Imran Khan facing legal challenges and political opposition. The government struggles with governance issues amid economic woes. And finally is the Afghanistan's humanitarian crisis post Taliban takeover. The Taliban's return to power in August 2021 led to a dramatic shift in governance, impacting democratic structures and human rights. The regime change triggered a severe humanitarian crisis with widespread food insecurity, economic collapse, and restricted civil liberties, especially for women and minorities, questioning human rights. Now, let us see the implications for India in reference to all of these issues. Under the security concerns, first is the terrorism and militancy. Instability in neighboring countries like Pakistan and Afghanistan can lead to a rise in terrorism and militancy. For example, the Taliban's takeover in Afghanistan has raised concerns about terrorist groups finding safe havens and increasing cross-border terrorism in India, particularly in Jammu and Kashmir. Next is the refugee influx. Political and economic instability in Myanmar has led to a significant influx of Rohingya refugees into India. Similarly, economic turmoil in Sri Lanka has caused a small but notable influx of Sri Lankan Tamils into the Tamil Nadu. The next issue is the border management. Managing borders with unstable neighbors becomes more challenging. For instances, the political turmoil in Nepal requires India to be vigilant about border security and control illegal activities. So these are the issues when it comes to security concerns. Next is the economic impact. Economic crises in neighboring countries can disrupt trade flows. For example, Sri Lanka's economic crisis has affected tea exports to India. Political instability in Bangladesh can impact extensive trade relations with India. Next is the investment risk. Political instability deters Indian investments in neighboring countries. For example, Indian companies like Tata Group and Adani Group in Bangladesh could face operational challenges due to political turmoil. And finally, it is the economic assistance. India might need to provide economic assistance or loans to stabilize neighboring countries. For example, India's financial assistance to Sri Lanka during its economic crisis, especially during COVID. Now, under the third challenge, which is the diplomatic challenges, India must support democratic values while engaging with whoever is in power to have a balance of act. For example, India's engagement with the Taliban in Afghanistan to ensure regional security and humanitarian aid without endorsing their regime. The instability allows other powers like China to increase their influence through initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative BRI. So there is a chance for regional influence. For example, China's investment in Nepal and Sri Lanka challenge India's influence, requiring India to respond with strategic and economic engagements, which is more helpful than China. And finally, these strategic opportunities. Here, crisis can allow India to assert itself as a regional leader, having a leadership role. For example, India's COVID-19 vaccine initiative, called the Vaccine Maitri, boosted its image as a responsible regional power. Next is strengthening alliances. Instability can lead to stronger alliances with stable neighbors. For example, the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar has led to calls for India to balance human rights concerns with strategic interest. India's timely assistance during Sri Lanka's economic crisis in 2022 to 23 helped maintain goodwill and counter China's influence. Post Taliban takeover in Afghanistan, India focuses on humanitarian aid and diplomatic engagements to ensure regional stability and counter terrorism. With recent shifts in global and internal political and economical landscapes among neighboring countries, India has an opportunity to renew its neighborhood first policy, that is the NEP. Thank you for watching this video, and don't forget to give a like, comment and share. And to further not to miss any other contents, subscribe to our channel. Thank you and have a great day.